I want to talk this morning about a serious problem, actually. And it's a problem that everyone faces, that no one can escape, and that no one can solve but one. And I want to introduce that problem with a kind of personal account. I have two daughters. I'm chuckling because, well, one's 20 and one's 17. And I know what you're thinking. It's like, he's got a teenage daughter? He's an old guy. How did that happen? I can't remember. But I do need prayer. When my eldest was about 6 or 7 years old, actually she was baptized when she was 6, and she kind of had the what, but she didn't have the why, of course. And so she asked me, Papa, how do we know that God is true, is the way she put it. How do we know that God is true? And I got to thinking about, of course, this is what I talk a lot with adult audiences about, but now I've got to explain it to my daughter, and I'm thinking, how can I put it in words that will make sense to her? And finally, a phrase came to mind. And so what I told her is the reason that we know that God is true is because he's the best explanation for the way things are. The reason that we know God is true is because he's the best explanation for the way things are. Now, this goes to what scientists would call explanatory power. You see an effect, and you want to come up with an explanation for the effect that explains it adequately, okay? And so it's a very common notion, explanatory power. And I think if thoughtful people are looking for an answer to the big questions about the way the world is and why the world is the way it is, what's behind it all, they'd want to have an answer that accomplishes that. That is a great explanation for what they find in the world. It's a principle you can apply to lots of issues, but I think it's especially applicable to the issue I want to talk about this morning. Because it doesn't matter where you live or when you lived, everybody knows that something is wrong with the world. The world is broken. So here's the question. What explanation of reality makes the best sense of mind-numbing evil and suffering? Now, massive numbers of people would say it ain't theism of any sort. And it's a problem of evil is a big objection that people have about the existence of God and therefore against Christianity. And there's a reason why, and I want to illustrate it from a movie I saw many years ago, and some of you might know this film. It's called Sophie's Choice. And it's a movie about a Polish woman who had an experience in a concentration camp in the Second World War. And it really influenced the rest of her life. And about 2/3 of the way through the movie, there's a scene where Sophie, being played by Meryl Streep, is speaking to her love interest, Kevin Kline, the actor, about this tragic moment that changed everything for her. And she begins to explain what happened almost in a monotone. I was arrested. My children were sent with me to Auschwitz. When the train arrived at Auschwitz, the Germans made their selection, who would live and who would die. And then as she's reflecting, there's a flashback. You see it in kind of sepia tone. You see a German soldier in front of her and her children, one on each side. You may keep one of your children. The other must go. Do you mean I have to choose? I can't choose. You are a Pole, not a Jew. It gives you a privilege, a choice. But I can't choose, or I'll send them both away. John, my little boy, was sent to children's camp. And my little girl, Eva, was sent to crematorium too. She sighed and then wiped her eyes and said she was exterminated. And then as the tears are streaming silently down Sophie's face, she says, I knew that Christ had turned his face away from me. And only a Jesus who no longer cared for me could kill those people that I loved. And Sophie's dramatic and moving reflection there in that film, I think, echoes our deepest doubts about God. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. This challenges us about God and His power and His love and His goodness. Now, the problem can be expressed in a very simple fashion. If God is absolutely powerful and absolutely good, He would have the ability to get rid of evil, and He would want to get rid of evil, yet evil still exists, so therefore God probably doesn't exist either. And this is one of the atheists' most powerful arguments against any form of theism, a tenacious objection that is very damaging. In fact, it's a powerful defeater against Christian theism, and if it goes through, it's fatal. But there's more to this, though. It's not just the kind of philosophical syllogism that for which a person draws the conclusion, well, there is no God, because the real problem of evil is not intellectual. It's personal. Sophie's dilemma wasn't intellectual. She wasn't pondering on the contradictions between a good God and a powerful God in the presence of evil. No, she said, only a Jesus who no longer cared for me could kill those people that I love. And when you and I face tragedy, and we're torn with anguish, and we cry out, where was God? Where is He? It's not intellectual. It's personal. So as I talk this morning about the problem of evil, I want that to be clear because, for many people, like Bertrand Russell, the great 20th century British philosopher who is an atheist, he said, how can you talk about God when you're kneeling at the bed of a dying child? And I know there are people in this audience that are asking the exact same question because they're facing circumstances like this. It's personal. So I want to be clear about one thing from the very start. Given that this is a personal issue, I am not addressing this problem principally from a philosophical perspective. Now, I have advanced degrees in both theology and philosophy. But I address this issue as a human being, just like you do, who's got to live in a world that's filled with brokenness and pain and suffering. I have to answer the problem of evil for myself, just like every other human being. Now, this is a point that I want to make sure that you get, especially if you have to confront this as a follower of Christ with an atheist who throws this in your face. I get it. I understand it. But this is not a theist's problem. It's a human problem, which means every single individual and every single philosophy and every single religious view has to address it, not just us. And so if there's somebody who's an atheist who says, look, I can't believe in God anymore because of the problem of evil, I say to him, you know what, I get it. But I also want to point out something. You've gotten rid of God. I get it. But you have not gotten rid of the problem. Now, my question of you is, you tell me how you solve the problem of evil if the universe is just molecules in motion. Because there is no answer for him. In fact, the standard atheistic response at this point, when they're honest and consistent, is to say there is no evil in the world. Because that's consistent with their view. But isn't that ironic that they're rejecting God because of all the evil in the world, and then they adopt a view that denies there can be any evil or good in the world? So I want to address this issue in this regard, since the real issue regarding the problem of evil is not just intellectual, but also personal. What I want to find out is which way of seeing reality has the best answer. Which one is the best explanation for the way things are? And that entails a couple of things. Which way of understanding can at least make sense of the challenge? In other words, it's got to be an answer that takes evil seriously. And secondly, it's got to be an answer that gives us some resources to deal with it as human beings. You might call that the existential problem. How do we as individuals face evil and deal with it in our own lives? Not just make sense of it in the broader sense in our worldview. And that's what I want to do here this morning. I want to show that on the biblical view, now I say the biblical view because that is the Bible is what defines reality. It helps us to know the way the world really is and answers the questions that we encounter in reality. I want to show you that the answer, when you ask the question, how do we make sense of this? What is God doing to help us solve the problem? And what I want you to see is that the answer to evil is not atheism. The answer to evil is just the opposite. The answer to evil in the world is God in Jesus on a cross at Calvary. Now stay with me here. This is not a simple three-point sermon. I'm going to hold your hand a little bit with it because it's a tough issue. And, you know, some things might just go over your head. That's all right. It might hit the person behind you, okay? But hopefully I'll give you some perspective on this, some things that you haven't thought of before. And what I want to do first is to make some points that will actually simplify the issue. And I'm going to simplify the issue by taking a closer look at the problem itself. Because there are a couple of things inside the problem that have ramifications for how we solve the issue itself. So here's my first point. If you're taking notes, this is what you can put down. The first thing you should put down is this is everybody's problem. Even the atheist's problem. That's really important. By the way, if you don't remember anything else here, you can take that to the bank. They've got to work on that too. They can't just say, no God. Okay, now you've got that in your lap. You tell me now how there can be so much evil in the world if there is nothing but molecules in motion. You with me on that? Okay, as for my outline though, first point, evil is something. Write that down. Evil is something. No duh. That's brilliant. Of course it's something. That's why people are complaining. That's why we're complaining. But I want to tell you something. There's a whole bunch of people in this country that have a worldview that reduces evil to nothing. And that worldview is called relativism. Now, relativism is simply the idea, the way I'm applying it has broader application. But when it comes to morality, relativism is the idea that there is no absolute or objective right or wrong for everybody. You have your view. You have your view. Other people have their view. Who's to say who's right? Who are you, you might have heard this, to push your morality on me? Now, when they say your morality, what they mean is you have your standard. Okay, you're welcome to it. But all that is your personal standard. Don't act like it's written in the sky somewhere and applies to everybody else. Nothing is written in the sky everywhere. It's just up to the individual. That's called moral relativism, as opposed to moral objectivism, which says that morality is not just inside you and your own personal opinion. Different people have different opinions, and that's all you can say about it. But rather, morality is something on the outside, and it invades upon us from the outside because it's an objective feature of the world. Now, I'm just describing two different views, but if you got lots of friends that are relativists, or at least they talk like that, all right? But I want to tell you why this is such a problem regarding the first point, that evil is something. How many of you know of the famous highway in Germany called the Autobahn? All right, most of you, good. Can you break the speed limit on the Autobahn? No, you can't? Why not? There's no speed limit. You can't break a law that doesn't exist, right? Now, I have driven on the Autobahn. It was fun. In a rental. And, you know, I'm going like 140 or something like that, and I only bear it for about 5 seconds because, you know, you hit an insect, and you're in trouble at 140 miles an hour. So I backed off to 60, and I felt like I was walking, you know. But in the Autobahn, you can't break the speed limit because there is no speed limit. You can't break a rule that doesn't exist. You cannot be a lawbreaker in that regard on the Autobahn in Germany because there's no law to break. Are you following me? So if you're a relativist, this transfers, and you think there are no speed limits in the universe, then there are no broken speed limits, right? And if there are no broken speed limits, there are no criminals, there are no law breakers because there's no law. And if you follow the parallel, if there are no laws in the universe, then there can't be broken laws, therefore there cannot be a problem of evil. Evil isn't something, it's nothing. Whatever it is, it's a make-me-up, but it's not real because there are no laws to break. You see what I'm talking about here? So if a person is going to be consistent in his relativism, he cannot complain about the problem of evil because that requires laws that exist that get broken that he complains about. But from the one hand, he's saying, well, there are no laws. I can do whatever I want. I was a relativist before I was a Christian. Now, I was in college at UCLA. I was at Michigan State. I was at UCLA. Then I became a believer. And the reason I liked relativism is because I could do whatever I want without feeling any blame. I mean, that's pretty convenient, and I think that's motivation for a lot of people. But in my situation, okay. But I was complaining about the war in Vietnam because at that time, there was war there. Because it was an immoral war. How does that work? How can I say there is no morality and this action is immoral? You see the contradiction. That's the way most people live in the world today. But if you're going to be a relativist, you're welcome to it, but you're not welcome to the problem of evil. If you're going to stick with the problem of evil, that's common sense, then you're going to have to abandon your relativism if you're a thoughtful person about these kinds of things. So my first point is that evil is something, and therefore that rules out relativism. If there is a problem of evil, relativism is out. Now, this one, next step on the same point is going to be a shocker. Because I want you to think about my parallel there with the Autobahn. Now, let's say it's not the Autobahn. Let's just say it's an island somewhere that nobody owns. And you have like a really fast Porsche. I'm not saying where you get it, I'm just making this up, right? And this island has got a massive salt flat. You know, salt flats are like totally flat and you can go really fast, like the Bonneville salt flats in Salt Lake City, okay? So you got a Porsche on this place that no one owns and you can drive to your heart's content. Now, I'm going to ask the same question. Can you break the speed limit in your Porsche on that island? No, you can't. Why not? Because there are no speed limits. Okay, why not? Why are there no speed limits? Because there is no governing authority to set them in that situation. Speed limits are set by governing authorities. Laws are set by lawmakers. You can only have a lawbreaker if you have a law, and you can only have a law if you have a lawmaker. There's a logical connection between them. People who complain about the problem of evil, implicit to that complaint is the existence of laws. No relativism. But laws come from lawmakers. Therefore, because there's evil in the world, this is not just evidence for laws, universal objective laws, but for the lawmaker who makes them. So let me put it this way. No lawmaker, no laws. No laws, no broken laws. No broken laws, no problem of evil. But we have a problem of evil. Everybody knows that. That means there are broken laws. That means there are laws. That means there's a lawmaker. Now, if you're following me, here's the shocker. The existence of evil in the world is not a good argument against God. It's one of the best arguments for God. Now, that doesn't solve the problem on all these other questions. We'll get to some of that. But I just want you to see that. Philosophers call this the moral argument for the existence of God. It's my favorite argument for God's existence, and the reason it's my favorite is because of the power of the problem of evil. Because it's something that everyone knows no matter where you lived or when you lived. The world's broken. So if we're going to take on a worldview and say, well, this is the best explanation of the way things are, we better take the problem of evil seriously. And when you say there is no God, the problem evaporates because logically it cannot follow. So the first thing I'm saying is the evil is something. It's real. And what follows from that is the death of relativism and the falsification of atheism. All right? But this raises a difficulty for the Christian. Well, wait a minute. If evil is something, and God, therefore, is real, and God created everything, then God created evil. Okay? That seems to follow. So here's my second point. First one, evil is something. Second point, evil is not something. Huh? Just separate those words. It's not something. Let me ask you a question. Did you ever eat a donut hole? I don't mean those little round gut bombs you get there back there in the church with coffee, right? Gut bombs and belly wash. Did you ever eat a donut hole? I said, no, you can't eat a donut hole. Why not? Because that's where the donut ain't. There's nothing there to eat. You're right. Now, philosophers have a fancy way of saying this. They say that the donut hole does not have ontological status. You have no idea how much money I had to spend to talk like that. That means it doesn't have existence in itself. Here I'm walking around the stage, there's a shadow behind me. The shadow doesn't have ontological status. The shadow is a real thing, but it's not something. It's the space or what we see when light is missing. So the donut hole is the absence of donut. The shadow is absence of light, and evil is the absence of goodness. You see, when God made the whole world, He made it good. He made it just so. It was just the way He wanted it to be. Everything fit together, was moving great until the problem. All right? And then it wasn't good anymore. Now, some people want to think, well, God must be responsible for that. We'll get into the details of this in just a moment. But what I want you to see is, it's not a thing that God created. It's not a stuff that somehow had to be manufactured by the divine that floats around and gloms onto us and causes problems. Okay, so this is a little bit of a tricky concept, so I want to illustrate this, and I'm going to need a little help from somebody. I need a pencil. Leanne, do you have a pencil? Oh, okay, this is good. This is helpful. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Good. Ooh, Ticonderoga number 2, my favorite. I've written many intelligent things with the Ticonderoga. I've written a lot of stupid stuff too. So here's my question. Here's a pencil, an eraser, sharp point. There it is. Oh, I can erase it too. All right, great. Is this a good pencil? Yeah, I think so. Why is it a good pencil? It's a good pencil because it does what it's designed to do. Common sense, right? Okay, now I want you to watch something. Paying attention? Now is this a good pencil? No, it's not a good pencil. It's a broken pencil. It's a bad pencil. I don't mean bad naughty. I mean bad, it doesn't do what it was intended to do, right? Now, by the way, did I add anything to the wood, the lead, and the eraser when I snapped that pencil in two? Was anything added? No, nothing was added. What happened? Something was taken away. A capability. And by the way, when you think of the words that are used to describe evil, they're words like unrighteousness or immorality. The Greek word for sin in the Bible is hamartia, and it means you miss the mark. You don't hit the center of the target. Falling short of the glory, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So evil's not a thing. It's something, but it's not a thing. Here you go. Good luck. Bad pencil. So we know two things so far. Evil is something. Secondly, evil is not a thing. All right? Third thing. And here we come to a fork in the road, because if the question is, well, then if evil is something but not a thing, then what brought about the brokenness, the circumstance of evil in the world? And at this point, I've just been talking somewhat reflectively and philosophically, so to speak, as we look at the problem. Now we have to go into a story and see what the story says about where this came from. And since we are Christians, we go to the story that is meant to explain reality to help us understand this particular point. And the third point is, evil is an intruder, caused not by God, but by human beings. Evil's an intruder. It wasn't part of the original plan. Remember when God made everything, it was just so, it was just right. It functioned exactly the way his noble mind intended. And then something happened. Now, young people, when your parents give you boundaries in your life, do this, don't do that, they do it for a reason, because they understand how life works. And they know by giving boundaries, putting a fence around you in certain ways, that will protect you. And when you go outside of the boundary, and this doesn't make sense to you now, it will make sense to you later, I promise. But when you go outside of those boundaries that your parents set for you, something's likely to get broken. Maybe it's just a vase or a dish, or maybe it's one of Papa's tools or Mama's tools, whatever. I got to be careful. I was born in 1950, so I still talk that old way. Maybe what you end up breaking is a relationship. Maybe what you end up breaking is an entire life. And sometimes that breakage is irreparable. The boundaries are good for that reason. And God the Father made boundaries for human beings. And he did it for the same reason, because he knows how the world works. And he wanted them to work within the boundaries that he set for them so they would be safe. But when our first parents broke the boundary, they broke their relationship with God. They broke their relationship with each other. They broke their relationship with the environment. They broke the whole world. And a broken world produces broken people and broken circumstances. And this is what the story calls sin. Sin is destructive. And that's where evil came from. Not from God, but from human beings who God allowed to make choices that went south. And there's a little kind of side application here. And that is, your choices that you make for yourself have ramifications in the lives of a whole bunch of people that you never intended to hurt. And this is what's wrong with people saying, well, I can do this because I'm not hurting anybody. You have no idea the hurt that could follow from your errant behavior. None, until it's too late. Actions have consequences. But wait a minute, look, God's good, yeah. He's powerful, yeah. Well, why couldn't he just interfere and stop anybody from doing any evil? Well, he could have done that. He could actually have made human beings that where moral categories didn't even apply, like for animals. But animals aren't good companions for God. He was looking to be in friendship with those he made. And so those he made had to be of a certain sort of thing. And since God is a moral God, he made human beings moral creatures that could make choices, either good or bad. And by the way, the ability for us to make those kind of moral choices and to participate in virtue and in good things. You ever do a good thing and feel good about it? Nobody's nodding. You all got to your feet and applauded when the plate was passed, right? In other words, you were cheerful givers. You were doing a good thing, and you felt good about it. That's the way it's supposed to work. You do good, you feel good, and you feel good for the right reasons. And the feel good is not just a physical sensation, it's a soulish satisfaction. That's called flourishing. So the ability to make a choice to do good as opposed to do bad, well, that's a good thing. So that people chose bad, and we still do, problem of evil, is a result of a good thing God did. Okay, well, he's strong. Okay, he's good. Got that. He gives us that freedom. Yeah, but couldn't he stop us from doing bad? Sure. But if he stopped us from doing bad every single time, then we wouldn't have freedom. It's an either or. And I was making this point, a number of years ago. I was in the Ukraine. It was before either of the Russian invasions. I was speaking at a Christian school that doesn't even exist anymore. It's gone. The whole building has been razed. Buildings. But I was making this particular point. I had a translator, and I was trying to help them see that there's a contradiction involved with demanding that God make good people who can choose freely, who for whom it's impossible to do bad. God's going to prevent them with his power. And so I pulled out a paper clip like this, and there was a young man sitting in the front row. His name was Vitaly. Now, that was a little bit complicated for me to say, but he's a big guy, and I'm from Chicago, and he looked like a gangster. So I call him Vito. So, Vito, I need your help. He came up to me and says, can you take this paper clip and bend it into a square? Duh. He grabs this paper clip and he starts bending it around, and it's kind of missing a little part, but you get the picture. He makes it kind of into a square there, okay? Хорошо, good. All right, Vito, can you just bend this into a circle now? Duh. And he's banging around like this. Now, remember, it's got some bumps in it already, so it isn't a very good circle, but okay, I gave him credit for it, and mine isn't a very good one, and we're just going to call this a circle, okay? Okay, хорошо, nice job. One more thing, Vito. One more thing I want you to do with this simple little wire paper clip. I want you to bend it into a square circle. Yet. What do you mean yet? Look at the guns, man. You're big, you're strong, you're powerful. Can't you bend this into a square circle? Of course not. And the reason has nothing to do with power. You see, omnipotence in God means that God can do anything that power can do. God can't make a square circle. It's a contradiction in terms. It's nonsense. And creating human beings with genuine moral freedom that they can choose either good or either bad, and then acting in such a way that it's not possible for them to exercise their freedom to do bad is like a square circle. It's incoherent. It's a contradiction. And so it turns out that we escape, in a proper understanding of the nature of the problem and God's role in creation, we escape the apparent contradiction. It's not a contradiction. It's a contradiction to claim otherwise, actually. It's kind of funny. There's two contradictions. I mentioned one. It's a contradiction if you claim that you're an atheist and there's a problem of evil. That doesn't work. And it's also a contradiction to say that God could create human beings with genuine moral freedom who it's impossible for them to do wrong. So what we have in our understanding of reality is kind of the best of both worlds. But we can actually do better than that. Because what I said earlier is that since everyone has to deal with the problem of evil, the real question is, What worldview, what understanding of reality offers the best solution? Not just the, in a sense, philosophic, academic, intellectual issue dealing with the alleged contradiction, but what view is best situated to give us comfort and realistic hope? And here I want to go back to Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher of the last century, who said, what are you going to say? How are you going to talk about God when you're kneeling at the bed of a dying child? Now, the first time I heard that, I was flummoxed. I was silenced. I thought, man, I hope no atheist quotes Bertrand Russell to me on this thing, because I don't know what I would say. I would be OTL, right? Out to lunch. People still say that nowadays? I don't know. They say groovy? And then I heard Christian philosopher William Lane Craig give a response to Bertrand Russell. And here's what he said. He said, what is the philosopher atheist Bertrand Russell going to say when he's kneeling at the bed of a dying child? Tough luck? Too bad? That's the way it goes? No happy ending, no silver lining, nothing but devastating, senseless evil? In fact, Bertrand Russell can't even call it evil, not in a substantive sense, because he's an atheist. Atheists are struck dumb while kneeling at the bed of a dying child. They can't speak of the patience and mercy of God. They can't speak of the redemptive power. Well, God will take all things and work them together for the good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose, those who he's conforming into the image of his Son. And keep reading that passage, you'll see that's the goal. They can't do that. They have no good news, no hope for a broken world, because their worldview denies them anything but tormented silence. So what I like to do, just as I close here, is I want to talk about what is God doing about evil, given the reality of evil in the world, which now makes sense. And by the way, our entire story is about the problem of evil. It starts in the 3rd chapter, it doesn't end until 66 books later. Evil is part of our story, and our story's not over yet. So what is God doing? I'm going to give you 4 things very quickly, and I could say so much about each one. 4 things that God is doing in the context of a fallen world. And here's the first thing that he's done. He has given institutions like family and church and government to restrain the impact of evil in the world. We live in a fallen world? Yeah. Well, here, I'm going to do some things to make it more livable. Family. Now, God has ordained a particular kind of family that is under attack now, nonsensically under attack. All right? And again, I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm going to avoid going into details, but you guys know the drill. All different areas. And you also know when the kind of family that God described is not practiced in a culture, there is more evil in the world. And especially for children. You mess with the foundation, the whole edifice is going to shake. All right? Again, I have so much I could say about that, but I'll just... The family, the church. In other words, God has given the body of Christ in the world to mitigate the impact of evil. This is why he tells us to do these things. Encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak. On and on and on. Jesus, and he worked miracles. Many times he worked, these were attesting miracles. In other words, they were meant to attest to the truthfulness of his claims. All right? John says at the end of the Gospel of John, many other wonders and signs Jesus performed that are not written here in this book, but these have been included. He has 7 miracles there, so that you would believe. What? That Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and in believing have life in his name. So the miracles were meant to attest to Christ, but many times the text says he's looking at a circumstance and moved with compassion. He brings a healing. Okay? So a lot of times God is just, no, that's Jesus' body, and we are Jesus' body. Now, most of us don't have the ability to boom, like Jesus does, and create a healing, not instantaneously, but we are to bring healing to those who are ailing in our community first. Paul says, remember, you also are in the body. You know, there's a priority to Christians first as family, but also outside of the family too, because these are all human beings made in the image of God. Okay? And so this is a way that God mitigates evil in the world when the church is doing its job. Now I know, look, a lot of people complain about the church, and it's easy. It's a big target, okay? And they're beating up on the bride. I'm just saying I think the church is doing a pretty good job. When I say the church, I mean followers of Jesus. I don't mean Christians. I don't mean evangelicals. Half of evangelicals or self-proclaimed evangelicals are relativists, for goodness sake. Most of those people have really no clue. But those who are genuine followers of Christ, the Christ in the New Testament, they're making a difference, and they're doing a good job at it. Okay, bravo, good for you guys. So we got families, we got the church, and we also have government. God has given government for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do good. The main function of government is to suppress evil, not to do a whole range of other things that they get distracted by and therefore don't do the first thing. So when government is doing its appropriate job, and maybe there's other things they can do too, but I'm just saying, this is the foundation from God's perspective, then there's less evil in the world. No duh, right? So the first thing God has done is he's given us 3 institutions to help manage evil in the world: family, church, and government. Here's the second thing. God will give his Spirit to anyone who asks to help them to live a morally better life. You see, the problem of evil isn't out there. It's right here. We're the ones who are responsible. Our prints are on the smoking gun. And when God begins to work on the problem of evil, he begins to work in the lives of individual people who come to him and say, help me. And he'll be there. Now, some people say, well, I'm not so bad. I'm no Hitler. Good. One was enough. But you're no Jesus Christ either. And you're probably more like Hitler than you are like Jesus. We all need help. So he's going to give that help if we ask. Here's the third thing. There will be a time in the future when God will remove every remnant of evil from his creation. He will wipe away every tear. He will restore everything so it's just right. Now, some people want that to happen like right now, but I want you to think about that. If God were to erase all evil tonight at midnight, where would you be at 12:01? Once again, we're the ones who are responsible, not just Adam and Eve who messed the whole thing up, but all of us contributing to it ever since, and in spades, and happily. That means we stand guilty before God. And this brings me to the fourth thing and the final thing and the most important thing that God has done about evil. He has sent his Son to die for evil people. As was characterized by Pastor and the worship music and the words that were read, Jesus took the penalty. He paid the price. When people stand before Jesus at the end, and the books are opened, what I call the books of death, which record every single crime every person has ever committed. Jesus said, even a careless thought in your mind, you will give an account for the day of judgment. Then one of two things is going to happen, either perfect justice or perfect mercy. Perfect justice is punishment for everything you've ever done wrong, and God misses nothing. Or perfect mercy, which is forgiveness for everything you've ever done wrong, and God misses nothing. Either Jesus pays or you pay. That's the simple calculus. And this is why Jesus hasn't returned yet. Because mercy is continued to be offered so that more would come into the kingdom and be part of his bride and be given mercy instead of justice. Mercy which they don't deserve instead of justice which they do. Atheism is not the answer to the problem of evil. God is the answer in Christ on the cross at Calvary. And he's not just simply the best solution. He's the only solution. He's the best explanation for the way things are.